And hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Archer Report, where it's all happening here on the Archer Report. It's great to have you here. So we're going to talk to Kevin Flynn, the CEO of Ambit, which is a VPN company. Firstly, I want to ask you, Kevin, how are you? How's everything going? Are you safe and well? And there seems to be a lot of action there in the United States.
Yes, I'm safe and well. I'm doing okay. I'd say there are things to be optimistic about and things to be disappointed about. So that's how it goes. I think right now more things to be disappointed about than excited, but that's okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, we are in the silly season. It's election season, so we know historically it always gets a pretty hyper active around this sort of time. We are under 100 days, 90-something, 80-something days now until we may or may not see a changing of the guard with Joe Biden and Trump. So, this is going to be interesting. Joe Biden may or may not survive. He's got some lawsuits on his back. His cognitive abilities seem a little wishy-washy. Trump, we'll see. It's very interesting, and we're obviously supporting the USDP and Charlie Cam, which is all about technology and science and how technology and science will, reinforce the American dream and build us to a better future. You're in the space of technology, VPNs. So, did you want to talk about VPNs?
Yes, I think that as we really dig into the marketing aspect and the claims and the technology, we've kind of uncovered a lot of interesting things. So there's a lot of misinformation about privacy, and I think that anyone who works in this space knows that. So, it's kind of like being that tough kid that wants to get along with the other tough kids, and they all have some rite of passage, and they all say that they have done it, but the reality is most of them haven't. And VPN privacy is kind of like that. Everybody says that they have it because they want to tell people that they know the best product and that they're secure and they feel good about that, but the reality is they don't. And it's just for saying that they have it. And VPNs are very much like that. And what has happened in the VPN space in the last 10 years is that people have realized that they can dupe people. They can deceive them, they can trick them into thinking that if the company is offshore, that you're safe. So if I set up a British Virgin Island company or a Panama company or a Cyprus company, and I name it, offshore VPN. So people will be like, oh wow, so the Chinese government or the NSA or Russia or Europe can't see what I'm doing. But it's just a certificate saying that the company is there. And if you actually look at the financials of these companies, there are no financial treasury assets there. They're in the reporting. So it's just a shell. And that they can attach the name of that shell company to the VPN and deceive people. The real test of security will come from the server location, and then any technical vulnerabilities in those servers, and then the encryption standard that you use. And then most importantly, the ethics and incentives aligned of the VPN owners, right? So that's really important. So 50% of VPNs are owned by Chinese companies, which is fine. So it's a competitive free world market. It's a problem when you lie about your ownership. And so let's say an American VPN makes a VPN that's called Toyota VPN, and we sell it to Japanese people with the intention of tricking them into thinking it's a Japanese-owned VPN. That's in the business of privacy, where you're responsible for all of my internet traffic, which includes the email payload, and in there is your logins, password, access to your healthcare records, your entire life, right? Your chat logs, all that encrypted payload passes through the tunnel. So your WhatsApp conversations, your TikTok stuff, and then your metadata. So that is like your location where you live, your location travel routes where you live, every time that data is uploaded and you log into something, and the times you travel to things. And then from that, you can apply some machine learning algorithms and predict next week, each day of the week and each time where you will be and what you will go based on the past patterns. So metadata is extremely dangerous information to share. So for example, if Pakistan and India were to have a hot war, if you were to collect the metadata from mobile apps of your adversary, you would know the locations of all their military officers, all their family members, and what coffee shops they go to, and when they will be there. And if you wanted to conduct a terror attack, you already know everything about them. You just got to have them use your mobile app. And then you collect that data and you can pattern them. So that's when you hear governments talking about the dangers of these apps and the information they share. And it actually is absolutely important. And then this is like Cambridge Analytica was a lot about like rigging elections, but the data that you can collect from TikTok, data you can collect from a VPN, so pornography, maybe downloading torrents that you're not supposed to, embarrassing information, all your emails, everything. It's far more rich information. And if you wanted to influence an election, that's how you do it. And so it's very important that when you buy a VPN, you know who the final owner is. You know them, where they live, what courts that they are responsible to, and that court actually has a rule of law, right? So in the United States, if we're harassed by one institution, we can go to another, right? So if the federal government harasses me, I would go to the governor, right? The state government. So you saw like during COVID-19, the state governments disagreed with the president on a number of things and went their own way. That's what's so interesting about the United States, is that the central government never has all the power. You can always play one group against the other. So if a person is competitive minded, this is the playing ground to be, right? Someone said to me, what if the next president changes the laws and says you can't own firearms? Then I'll back the president after them and take it from them. What if they try to get rid of encryption? Then I will throw lots of money to the senators and lobby ethically to fight it, right? That means in the United States, the individual is a political player. I get to determine if I push enough resource the future. And if I don't like what the president's doing, his ass is out, right? So when you operate a privacy company and like that, there is no big bad boogeyman from me. The big bad boogeyman, I will determine whether they keep their job or not next election, right? So I am their boss here. And that's how it is here in the United States. A lot of people are not familiar with that. And that's why in my company, at Ambit, and we rolled out our product, Ambit VPN, we operate here. Because we can participate in the political system, we can control our destiny, and there are no scary boogeymen. The scary boogeyman is us, if you think about it, right? And so, like, I want to get into that. It's really important in this particular. I want to tangent. I'm setting the stage. You know where I operate. Our company is here. If we lie to you, you can ruin my life. You can sue me. You can bury me in debt. You can ruin my reputation, right? If it's offshore and you don't know the owner, nothing you can do. They can cut and run, steal all your money, all your records, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's nobody to sue. You don't even know who the owner is because you didn't check. And these offshore VPNs make up more than 50% of the world VPNs that we use. And in fact, 50% are just Chinese, not counting all the other ones that have really poor rule of law. And so that's kind of the rabbit hole we went down and digging into this space, and we realized that there seemed to be a lot of dirty things happening in the VPN. So recently, 7 VPNs got caught lying about not having logs, and they said they don't have logs, and it turns out they did. Someone hacked them and found the logs. So then a company is only as good as the CEO's words. And so you really have to have some decision to trust them. And one of the basis for trusting is incentives aligned. And I just explained to the audience why my incentives are aligned. For example, I'm a firearms owner, right? So I'm never going to comply with certain things because I see myself as an autonomous entity, right? That wants what I want no matter what they decide. And I'll turn it over to you if you have questions. And I like this topic a lot, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really good. And, you know, the autonomy of the individual is very important in the United States. The president isn't in the context of the president of the United States, he's not an emperor. He's not a monolithic figure in the way that some people think of him as. And I think, you know, you do need guidance in the case of coronavirus. Of course, you do need guidance from Washington. But the governors would complain, or they wouldn't complain. It's this thing with Trump. Whatever he does or he doesn't do is complained about in equal measure. If he gives the governors autonomy, it's complained that he's not taking leadership. If he stamps his foot down and says this is mandatory across the whole country, they'll call him a dictator. So he can't win either way, and this is very confusing for people who argue. And don't realize that they're just putting pressure on Trump, whatever, and it confuses and muddles the conversation of actual powers of the president, and it demoralizes the American population into not recognizing their power as individuals. Trump is the president is a vehicle of the people to balance against the Senate and the House of Reps. It's the people's. That's why you get to vote on the president every couple of years. So, this is a very important. Idea. And as you were saying, back in the old days, it was the mail, it was U.S. Postal. This is where the information was going. There used to be privacy concerns over U.S. Postal and mail, people reading the mail and stuff. This has all moved on now to it's all about the digital footprint and securing yourself digitally, so that you don't get eviscerated in just in the marketplace as a person, as a human being. And this is why VPNs are important. So the VPN market is quite competitive. We like Ambit here. We love Ambit, but there's other ones like Surfshark. So what puts your company, what's it sets it apart from a company like Surfshark, for example? Apart from the fact that some of these other companies have been caught lying, or they're offshored, or they're within the context of a competitive player like China. What sets you guys apart over there at Ambit?
Okay, number one is that we are a hardcore network security company. Number two is we focus on what they call post-quantum encryption. And we observe the National Institute of Standard Technology research area in post-quantum encryption. So currently there is a competition between Russian, Chinese, and other teams to develop cryptography that can withstand decryption attempts with a quantum computer at a certain scale. And that's coming in, like, let's say about 3 years. So within a number of years, in a very short period of time, all the currently harvested encrypted data. So let's say you have chat logs with WhatsApp, and let's say they're stored historical at Facebook. In a couple of years, when somebody were to get a hold of those encrypted chat logs, they can use a quantum computer and read everything, decrypt it. Same thing goes for your healthcare records and the history of them. Same thing goes for your web browsing history, even if this is encrypted. So with a quantum computer, they just record the traffic, and they can just decrypt it really quickly. And so this kind of puts the world in a very bad situation when it comes to creating new democracies, because the ability to assemble in private on the internet is really important to resisting tyranny, right? But if things can be harvested in a couple of hours and decrypted quickly, then we're in really big trouble, right? And so the idea is that we want to make data that can be recorded from now going forward, years later, still be unreadable. And we call that enduring digital privacy. And so we rolled out right now what they call transitional post-quantum encryption. And next year we're rolling out what is really defined as post-quantum encryption, which means that up to like 1,000 logical qubit with a quantum computer, they still can't crack the encryption. So harvest it whatever they would like. And it's really important to do that because, privacy is an inalienable birthright, and those who wish to engage in that should be able to. And especially now, in the United States, it's very politically volatile. And seems like, especially at the state level, personally, I'm extremely disappointed in their ability to enforce the rule of law. So where I live, they looted and they broke into the diamond stores and shopping mall. And there was no real police response for about 8 hours. I was here. So the looters actually sat on my front doorstep. And it's really unfortunate. So I have a Chinese neighbor, and they took off their Chinese characters on their window. So the next thing I went over the house and I said, "Are you all okay? I noticed that did you do that out of fear?" And and they were really shook up. And I wrote the city council here in Bellevue, Washington, and the mayor next to Seattle, and said, "I'm deeply disappointed, and you should have enforced the rule of law and ensured it didn't happen from a deterrence perspective. And you should not have thought that it's better just to let them do it because that's not confrontational and violent nonsense." Now the population has lost trust. The average working person, the immigrant from India who saved up 10 years to fly here on a one-way ticket to work at Microsoft, has lost faith in the government to make this safe for them. And all because of your stupid goal of wanting to appeal to a fringe political faction that has no legitimacy in terms of the average person's interests, right? And it's just the US is right now at the state and sometimes municipal level totally bonkers. And they don't care about the average person, no matter their ethnicity, right? They don't care about them. They want to pander to the most extreme groups who should be protected but should never be allowed to speak for the majority and the policies that govern the majority ever, right? This is what democracy is about. You get proportional representation, protections, but you don't get to write the rules of how the majority use language. You don't get to write the rules for how the majority live or how the institutions are structured, right? So otherwise it's not a democracy. It's a tyranny when 3 million people write the rules for 327 million.
Yeah, so...
And that's the kind of direction they're going. And so just a different topic where I live. So from that, I lost all faith in them to do their job. So now for me, privacy is a lifeline. So if they came to my company and said, "We want you to help us to find all the people who purchased handgun ammunition," I will tell them, "Beat it, I'm not helping you." And then if they say, "You have to help us," then I will say, "You know what, you're gonna lose your election seat. I'm gonna ruin your job. I'm gonna ruin your life." Or I will go to another government or another state or another one, and the fight never stops now. Americans are activated, and they lost all trust in the institutions to protect them because of these bonkers people that care about who wins the election.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, and VPNs are very important because you should be able to research your government or search what you want and do some reading and research without the fear of being called out and doxxed and all of this sort of stuff as well. We find that it's increasingly important that even researching, even reading, even having an opinion is encroaching on your ability to get work, to live and to function, and what stores you can go into and what you can't. It's all becoming politicized. So if you can do that research in a private environment, that in a secure environment, that's good for me. But on the political aspect that you were talking about, it feels like that here from Australia. So I've got two voices coming out of America right now. You've got Trump, who speaks for a diverse right-wing collective group, American populists and a fair few others. And then you've got these protesters. Biden is not an authoritative voice. I don't hear him speaking for really anybody, because if you go just under the surface of Biden, everybody on the left says that Biden doesn't speak for them, but he's the vehicle for what they need to achieve. So really, the two voices are these protesters that you're talking about, and Trump. That's the two voices I'm hearing at the moment. I'm not hearing Biden at all, which is.
Yeah, I'm not speaking about protesters. So there are legitimate concerns, right? For example, with certain communities facing discrimination and making different choices at night, what roads they go down and what towns they go through, right? So there obviously are issues. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the ones that take it a lot farther than that, right? We're talking about the ones that are wanting to burn down the courthouses, the ones that want to get rid of all the police now. And there's no empirical studies, there's no statistical analysis, there is no case studies on an actual plan. It's just like, oh, this is emotional, we can just do it. And I find this extremely dangerous.
Well,
and
I've seen Mayor De Blasio, not De Blasio. I think maybe it was De Blasio. But you know, there was $1 billion defunded in New York for the police, for example, and now crime is surging. You know, lots of people think that the police are, you know, a problem in the United States, that they're undertrained. What do you think? Do you have an opinion on this?
I don't actually. I'll take the Pew Research one. So over 80% of the African American population do not want to defund the police, and so 80% is more than 20%. So you lose. End of conversation. That's it. That's how democracy works, right? So no defunding. If we're going to do that, then let's ask. Let's take a vote. Let's see how it goes.
So then how can they explain New York's reaction then? Why would he defund it by $1 billion? Is that
because
pandering? Is that the sort of pandering you're talking about?
Yeah, if there is no actual vote, then you're just going off of some headlines, right, and some social feeds, and maybe 5,000 people who are protesting in front of you, but 5,000 is not 10 million, and that's the mob ruling over everyone else, and the mob does not get a policy voice. They can protest and represent, and then we go to vote. And if you don't get the vote, try again next time. And that's how it goes. So, you know, if you're against abortion and someone wins who's for it, then you lose. And you have to wait. Too bad. And then the other way, right? So then somebody who has a different view wins. And we accept this system, and we put this system before our individual values, right? And that is because the alternative is far worse. If you read Federalist Paper 9 by Hamilton, it was designed like this because they understood the worst. We're not supposed to have political change for everything tomorrow. We're supposed to have a slow, gradual process because the alternative is the risk of tyranny being wrong swiftly, right? So look at like what happened in China with Mao. So they said we're going to swiftly get rid of the culture because that's, you know, bad, and they swiftly murdered tons of people. So swift movement is a precedent you set for future leaders that can be set back, right? We have to be very careful about precedents. You know what I'm saying? So you might say this cause is good, so we move swift. But what about the next leader when they say take that precedent and they move swift under a very bad cause? And so from the process perspective, we have to place the process before what we want, because that process is our safeguard from someone else abusing that to do harm to us when it's not our turn, when in power. And that is my perspective from it. And there are more important things than getting reelected or getting in that issue you spent 20 years. There are way more important things than that. And that is safeguarding this process, because that protects us all from, guess who the most? From each other.
From each other.
The real tyranny is us, right? It's not the NSA, it's not the president, it's us. We're the real danger, right? Because we enable these people, right? So we have to protect us from ourselves, and we should never think we know what is best, because we don't. Doesn't matter. And then on a lot of these issues, the racial bias one is pretty clear, right? And we have work to do with structural improving these things. Nobody denies that there are disparities in income, right, that are along racial lines. No one denies that, right? They might disagree on the way to improve it. They might disagree on to the degree and where it shows its head, and the more sub-specific things, like whether or not it is on a regression, and you have different variables. Which one is the most important one? Economic level, or education level, or a specific city? Maybe it applies to more one city than another because the subcultures are different. America has many different cultures right across regions with different things can have different impact, different outcomes and socialization for people. And I think the only thing where they disagree is having a very, very careful approach, right? To be very thoughtful so we can maximize the outcome. There is no one that doesn't want to be successful in the world. However, there are people protesting who write things like F America, burn it down, and these people are trouble, right? So they have nothing to offer the United States of America or the decolonization people and stuff like that. I think that this is very extreme, right? What they're really calling for is, a complete reinvention of the United States of America. And if you talk to people in Asia, Europe, they don't want that. The ones I have talked to don't. They want the U.S. to stay the sole hegemon of the world. They want it to stay powerful, and they want it to be a shining hill as it is, not reinvented, right? They wanted to carry the torch of democracy and institutions in the way that it built them as a republic. And they want to carry that forward as a single political culture, not 5 or 6 or 7, right? And this is the best thing that ever happened to the world in the last 70 years. And the fall of empires was built upon the rise of the U.S., right? So the U.S. said that if you are a liberal country or you want to be on a 100-year roadmap to become a liberal country, even if you're a dictator now, we will protect the sea lanes for you and guarantee your trade is safe to and from port. And that was a big part of the end of empires, was the U.S. taking that over. But now, as we have other rising powers, there are people thinking that this competition will make the U.S. behave better. The problem with this is that we're reverting to the same kind of conditions we had leading up to World War II. More volatility is more uncertainty. Uncertainty results in more misunderstanding and likeliness of war. The likeliness of war is increasing. So I'm a humanitarian. I don't want 40 million people dead. So I would prefer to keep the current liberal world order. And if we have some kind of transition, it's not because it's being challenged by 2 authoritarian regimes. If you think that, you're crazy, that's good, right? And then the other thing that people need to understand is that, for example, a certain adversary, it's extremely racist place. Like U.S. is one of the least racist places in the world compared to some in Asia, where it's just shameless racism, where you can't even really be a participant in that society unless you look like that. All right, you have the glass ceiling for them is like down near your ankles. And a lot of Americans don't understand what they have. If the U.S. collapses, other people will, decide for us. Most Americans will be boat refugees, right? The rest of the world's not going to take us in. And so it's a little bit a shame that people want to burn something down that has done so much. Maybe it doesn't move at the speed they want, but there is no one in the world moving faster, right? And then if you make a precedent where you want to go fast, well, what happens when you have someone who doesn't like it? And they take that same speed and ruin everything you worked for. So we have very real zero-sum trade-offs that leave a pain somewhere, and we have to accept that pain. Life is not all sunshine and rainbows, and it never should be, because if it all is all rainbows, that means there is some deception somewhere, something, right, dangerous coming.
Oh, that's well put. That's very, very well put. And privacy of the individual and their ability to think and reconcile and research without without the threat of retaliation is very important. And I think that's why VPNs are very important as well, including what you're up to. But I think you're very right and succinct in your argument. I live in Asia or Oceania, depending on what you say. It's well known here that you can't really immigrate anywhere. You can't go very far in Asian society as an outsider. I couldn't move to China, for example. I couldn't move to Japan. I couldn't move to Korea and become a Korean or a Japanese or a Chinese person, for example, and go very far. I could move to India, but that's that's whatever. But that's got history there. But no, you are correct. And Americans are still a shining example of what the world wants, and a lot of this sort of domestic upheaval at the moment. America does that every now and again, and it's to sort out systemic issues and problems that America faces, and in a way that's actually very healthy for the society to go through, to talk about it and reflect on itself. But it doesn't have to be like this. For example, as you're talking about with your state governors and stuff, maybe they need to be swapped out and different ones put in with different ideas and different backbone styles. So this is true. But the other good thing about America that you have is you have different states with different levels of autonomy. And if you really don't like a place, I mean, you can definitely move states. When everything is the same across a whole region, if you don't like something, you have to move countries then, and that can be a lot harder. So that is a good thing.
fortunately, we can move states. So
Yeah.
freedom of movement is a way of hedging against centralized power. So, doesn't matter his reason or whether he's right or not. Elon Musk said, I'm moving to Texas, right? So that's just it. So in Seattle, one city councilman was talking about, coming after Jeff Bezos, and she had like frolicking at the mouth stuff and, really vicious sounding. And I thought, well, why would I start my business here then? That's a gift to you. Why do I give that gift to you? I would just go to the next state and do it. And then other investors and other, other business owners will leave, and then no one gets anything and everyone starves. And that's your fault. Too bad. So, that's the beauty of freedom of movement. And every capitalist knows that when they learn the pain of that, what comes next, right? Well, it's written right in Ayn Rand's work. Then they're going to start saying you can't move.
Yeah,
and then the behaviors more and more sound like what? Marxism, right?
Yeah.
You can't move. You're not allowed to leave, right? And leaving, being able to leave, is the way of ensuring they never have more power than you. It's essential, right? Because I, as a free citizen, am equal to the government in power, right? And maybe if I don't know that, it means I'm not resourceful enough up here. You don't need money to do it, right? So one thing that we did learn is that the people elected President Trump. Whether or not you vote for him, you learn that even the poorest person can be extremely resourceful, right? So we have elections, and we have that power. And we can always fire up the furnace and get the people fired up about something, right? And march on Washington. So, this is a democracy, and that is a good thing about it. And and same thing applies to capitalism and freedom movement. The real funny thing, though, you brought up about this, about New York, is that AOC was really pushing against Amazon creating those 100,000 jobs in New York, right, for conditions. And then when they were rioting, she said it's because they don't have jobs. Well, I guess that's your fault.
I always thought that was a really weird decision, because she was complaining about the pay rates and all this other stuff and the conditions and stuff. But yeah, when I did see that argument that you don't have jobs, I thought the same thing. I thought this is a very odd thing to say. It's like you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah. So a job is a privilege. It's a privilege you have because someone else created a company and they took risk out away from their wife and son or husband or partner, however you frame it, right? Mom and dad. And they took that risk, and the opportunity cost, the reward they get, is a financial success from that risk they put in the burden on their family starting it. And then they want to grow their company and they hire people, right? It's a very strenuous, painful process for people. And it involves a lot of risk and a lot of time away from their loved ones that they can never get back, right? And so when we burn down a business, we're burning down the time away from our families it took to build it. It's the most cruel thing in the world, right? And the other thing is that so these people do it, and then the gift that they give is they decide, I want to grow the company, right? And so they give this gift to people who decide to grow it or to take the risk. And of course they get something, everybody wins, right? But at the same time, she seemed, to my perspective, be ungrateful for that gift, right? So they didn't want the jobs, then fine. No one gets anything then, right? You can always, as a private owner of a company, say, you know what? I don't really like this anymore and you're harassing me, so no one will get anything. I'm firing everybody and selling all the assets tomorrow. And that is completely ethical, right? Because you're the one who put in all the risk at the beginning when nobody believed in you. Nobody gave you money to finally get there. And that means you have to be given more than everyone else. And for some reason, entitled little twats don't seem to value that.
Unless AOC is only talking about these people getting government jobs, and then what she's doing is she's billing the taxpayer for fake jobs. The government has a place. There's a separation of powers. There should be a government of some sort. We're not anarchists here. We're not, even the founding fathers of America, and all rational, human beings want some sort of government to enforce laws and structures and due diligence and due processes and manage some types of the economy and all that. But if her argument is just, well, all of these people should have good paying government jobs instead of working at Amazon, then that's cruel, because she doesn't realize the tax that she's putting on productive people and zapping that from the economy, and all the destruction of wealth that she's causing to entrepreneurs and to other businesses. And that's what happened to the Soviet Union. Now, I'm not saying AOC would have led to the Soviet Union, but what I am saying is that sort of thinking broadly applied across the population, where we're all entitled to a $100,000 a year government job where we all push paper around, leads to the destruction of the actual mental creation of actual jobs. And that's what happened. And the Soviet Union just rotted from the inside. The amount of potential. I've kept you over time. I'm sorry about that.
No, we can keep going for another 15 minutes.
All right, cool. Yeah, well, and that's the sort of arguments that you hear a lot. Now, I do have, and I've never not said, I do have sympathy with some of the points that Bernie Sanders raises about wealth inequality, about lack of opportunities, about student debt, about some of the cronyism that goes on. I'm a capitalist, you're a capitalist, but sometimes big businesses do bully smaller firms through monopolization or using the government. You would know this, or they allow insidious foreign competition in on purpose to undercut their own domestic competitors. There are tricks that big players do use to stuff, and I can understand some of the frustrations within the Bernie Sanders crowd. And I've never said point blank, Bernie Sanders, bad guy, don't understand what he's talking about, because he has some valid points. But the problem with the Bernie Sanders movement is that they were like what you were saying. I don't think it's so radical, but they do want a system change more to something that isn't the United States anymore. This is not what I would recognize as the United States. And that's what I think I have against someone like Bernie Sanders, for example.
I'm not going to get into candidates, so I will get into tone. So I think that tone is extremely important, right? So certain people don't like the current president because he maybe people argue he doesn't always have grace. The same can be said for people who are progressive, right? So I think Andrew Yang, he was really wonderful because he had grace, right?
Absolutely.
And so human beings, wealthy or poor, are humans. And if you want to persuade them, it requires grace. Some of them maybe are sociopaths and are not receptive, but not all of them, right? And if I build a business for 10 years and then I go turn on Twitter and someone's screaming at me about it, first of all, I'll personally be a bit upset about that. And number two, I'm definitely not working with you. I'm going to resist it just because you're being a jerk, and make sure that your political ideas are buried 10 feet below the earth because of you as a person being a jerk. And I think that if you want to engage America's wealthy, many of them have been on record saying that things have to change, right? Many of them. So it would be better to say, I want to work with them, rather than getting on YouTube and firing people up and screaming at them, right? Because they're humans. And we cannot dehumanize someone no matter who they are. Doesn't matter whether you're an ethnic minority or you're a wealthy ethnic minority or a wealthy person or whatever. You should never dehumanize people just because it gets you votes and people fired up. It's just my personal principle. So you either don't dehumanize anyone or you just forego that moral high ground, right? And you have a spotted track record. And that is my approach. The other thing about it is that these people seem to always be blind to foreign policy and the importance of it. I'm talking about mindfulness of economic competition, right? So if I am the CEO of a competitor to Amazon and I watch the US government go for them and raid their corporate cash, right? And say we're going to distribute this corporate cash to help the people. You know what I'm going to do? I am not going to spend any of that corporate cash, invest all of it, and improve my technology, and through improvements in that technology lower my cost, and then take all of their business, all of it, and bankrupt them to nothing and say, you did this. That's how the free market works. And so we do have to be mindful that, yes, we have to reduce the income gap, but we also have to be very careful not to put that before our companies staying competitive, not just this year, but over the next 25 years, right? So one thing living in South Korea taught me is that Samsung is about 20% or so of GDP contribution in South Korea.
Yeah, it's massive.
If suddenly they lose their mobile phone business, then the entire country is in trouble, right? And in the United States,
isn't there a, I'm really sorry for cutting you off, but just that's a really good point. Isn't there a Samsung City?
yes. So when in the U.S. it's the same thing, but maybe it's harder to observe that because people get lost in the size, right? But if a federal government were to change policies radically and impact the competitiveness of every American company, the U.S. will end up in the same situation. Things can be destroyed, and large countries can decline. And when they do decline, history says they usually never come back up again. And then we have a bigger problem. We have mass poverty, right, in ways that cannot be fixed. And so I think that we have to be realistic that the future of the US is on a fragile thread, and that the next 10 years of the US existing altogether are on a fragile thread. We should wake up every day worried the US won't be here next year and everybody's a boat refugee. And if we're not thinking like that as a leader, then we're pig-headed and stupid. And so then we go about our future with a sense of caution and worry, not just solving the problems today, but making sure we're here 25 years later. And then we want to calculate what are all the things that go into that. Well, reducing the income gap, making sure our companies are competitive, armed to the teeth competitive, and we want them to conquer and win and be the best in the world so that we can preserve our jobs that they gift us with from the risk they take. And then the gift the employees give to the company in their harmonious relationship of working very hard, right? The only way the US will stay relevant in this new world is to work like shit. I'm just telling you the truth, and there's no way around that. Each new year, millions of companies enter the competitive market from the developing markets. Guess what supply does? Pushes down prices, increases competition. Young people in America talk about we've achieved so much in the history of the US. First of all, there's no we. You're new. You didn't participate in that. You get the gift of riding on his coattails, okay? And the second thing is that I hate to tell young people, the future is bleak. So forget about having a better future. You better be thinking how you're going to survive, how horrible it is, and get your mind in a very different place. We're running out of helium in our lifetime. Helium will be gone. No more flying balloons, right? But that should be a proxy correlated to a whole bunch of other things, right? And there is no stopping that. There's no Green New Deal won't stop it. Nothing will, right? There are 200 countries rising up. Most of the pollution comes from the emerging world, not from the US, right? And they're not going to stop at anything. They will just call you an imperialist, no matter what you look like as president. And so they don't care. It's a very zero-sum world from their point of view. And there's no US president that's going to have the power to change their mind, right? And so the competition will be crazy. In 10 or 20 years, software engineering wages will be at the bottom because it'll all be automated anyway. Computers will be programming computers. And if the US is relatively declining, then American youth have it even worse. If they want to survive, they should be worrying about the power and relative wealth of the United States, because through that they can be successful, right? Because then they have wealth to invest, to create jobs and stuff like that. People need a very holistic approach that is risk adjusted and not very narrow, short-term, this year kind of thing. Now that is very hard for people. I've been poor. When I was 18, I slept on couches because I had nowhere to live. I very much understand that pain, right? But also when I was 15 and it was just my mother and I made $5.25 an hour, and I think my mother made $7.25 an hour, right? And on my high school graduation day, we were evicted from our apartment because we didn't have money. From my perspective, that's just normal life. It's hard, right? And I don't expect a better life than that. That's my generation anyway, right? But then I meet to young people and they're like, oh, things can be better. And I'm like, no, what are you talking about? The future is going to be far harder than I had it. Far harder. When I grew up, we had a lot less competition. When I grew up, the US military wasn't in perpetual war, so if you want to join the military, you had really limited risk and all kinds of upside, right? And so, even without the US is not, even if the US pulls back from Afghanistan and Iraq fully, there still will be plenty more wars coming. And that goes back to international relations theory around the conditions of multipolarity. So you have more competitive players, more room for uncertainty, and more smaller countries trying to move around to get something around that global uncertainty. And there's going to be more conflict. And also more resource scarcity is coming. And they have a hell of a time. And so my perspective when it comes to youth is you better completely change all your expectations. And imagine the future is hard. And so what can I do to contribute? Where can I help? Right? It's not time to enjoy life. It's time to ask, where can you help? Because we're all going to die. Kind of mentality. Right? And it's not going to happen by reducing ourselves to eco-villages with decolonization either. That's not going to work. We have to produce our way out. The same thing we have done for 10,000 years and 400 generations. And we have to pioneer our way out. And shamelessly so, and colonize space. Decolonization, what are you talking about? We're just getting started.
Well, yeah, Malik, who we love on this show, she calls it space settlement. So we use the word space settlement on this show because it removes the negative connotation that colonization of space might have with it. But I draw sympathies from your use of the word. I use it as well. But if Malik's watching, I'm going to say space settlement. So. There you go. I'm out of trouble now. But I totally agree. And we need, this is, carbon nanotubes. This is the big one. Can we get the space elevator up in the next, before 2050? That's the real big issue. Reusable rockets are fantastic. They're great. I'm really impressed by them. But yes, can we get some geostationary orbit, satellite where we can get some sort of carbon nanotube, space elevator thing that will really boost us up. But I'm totally in agreement with you. We've hit peak civilization. It seems to be in a sort of a we're riding on the sort of plateau of a peak plateau right now, and I think COVID it was a tipping point of some gigantic proportions, echoing a future of something like you describe, and but that's not cause for despair. We humans perform better when we're put under pressure. Maybe this is the wake-up call that people need to jump out of their complacency and actually start dealing with some of the issues and problems that we face around the world. And this is what we've been doing here on the Archer Report. We try to report on some of these issues and talk about these issues, and and say this is what we think are issues, and how put a challenge out there to people of how would you sort out some of these environmental problems, these debt crisis problems, these national problems, these resource scarcity issues. Let's try and innovate and talk about space technology or cyber technology, the debates of privacy, and collective security in the digital space, and that's why we met in the first place. Pulled along on this adventure of ethical considerations, and you're right when you're talking about computer replicators in terms of self improving computers. This will be huge in the innovation sector. And the automation sector, automating a lot of the jobs away. But this isn't cause for total alarm. I mean, this will free up, as you've seen with some of these, I think this will free up our time, space, and cognitive ability for higher uses. But let's see. It could be a very Philip K. Dickian dystopian version, or we could, preconceive these and try and avoid some of those dystopian attitudes and futures, and go towards a more positive one, which I think is something very, very possible. Well, I want to say thank you so much for coming on. To take it up to the hour if you want, but I've got 10 minutes on the clock. So if there's anything else you wanted to say, but you can jump out at any time you want. But I want to say thank you very, very much for coming on and participating on this show. We've blown way over time, but we love having you on, and your thoughts and perspectives are very, very valuable. And congratulations, on your quantum encryption aspirations. These are very, very important. I think personally, cybersecurity is at the forefront of the one of the talking points right now, especially with social media being such a divisive topic. And in just as a news article that's floating around now, Trump got deleted from, I think, Facebook and Twitter. His post got removed for violations on what Facebook and Twitter say is coronavirus false news, which is interesting. So the president of the United States can get kicked off. His Facebook posts and his Twitter posts can get removed for what Facebook and, which is they're a free company. They can do what they want. But this is the power that they have now, and this is set in stone, that they can say, no, we think your coronavirus talk is false. Delete, essentially, or removed it or something. So this is the world we live in now. And so do we want to continue going down these path with these monoliths? And it's gone right up to the White House, which makes it a very, very real debate. So I think that's another way that we can reintroduce the conversation of the value of personal security when it comes to online, and digital infrastructure, which I think is very important, because we need it for research. We need it for to adapt and to come up with solutions to some of the problems that you brought up about our future.
I think that the American tech companies need to realize that we do not live in a global world, and we live in a world with the United States of America and other countries distinctly. And so we are not one world economy. We are a country with borders and passports. And so, for example, if I'm in South Korea and there is a war and I go to the German embassy, they will turn me around, right? And I have to go to the US embassy. I know that because my job when I was in the army there was, one of my part-time jobs was to be the person responsible for that evacuation procedure. And non-Americans don't get evacuated out, and so do non-French and non-Europeans and non-Portugal. So you only can go to the place you are from. So when the shit hits the fan, that passport is your lifeline. And we are not one world, and watch those countries not treat you like that. So it's really important to understand that those companies and then people that work there, if the United States is not successful, they have nowhere to go. And, so for example, I learned recently that some search engines control the top 10 search results when you search them, right? And so I came across another search engine called Gibaru. And it's a search engine that is more private, and it's Gibiru. And I learned a lot by talking with them about the problem in the search engine space. So I thought, my God, what about the tyrannical countries? Do they pay to play to give those governments the search engine results they want for their people? So one of the things to be mindful of in precedents is that the US has a global audience. And when we do these things, we're setting a precedent for the other countries as well. So when the US does that with US president, what about when the Chinese leadership asks of the same thing of them? So if they want access to that market, there will be companies that will comply and there'll be ones that will not, right? And some companies will happily give them what they want. And so they are directly complicit in preventing democracy from taking root. There is this illusion that democracy comes from increase in GDP or income. Totally false. Show me the empirical result for that in paper. It's a problem they rationalize for themselves to punt the problem forward and excuse themselves from personal responsibility to care about the future of the world. And so either they accept that the world is best when every country has a democracy, or they reject it, and it's binary, and they have to go ahead and make their position, right? If they want to care about the future of the world. Personally, I care, right? So I'm an idealist, and I would like on sometime on 25-year or 100-year, we arrive at a place where people don't feel like to be successful in life, you have to worship a political party. Total nonsense, right? So what about self-actualization? But if people are all too quick to look at Instagrams and TikToks, we'll never have self-actualization, right? And that is also the problem with big, is that they care more about profits and more about getting likes and clicks than they do where humanity goes, right? And so these things are deeply concerning. Personally, I want to back up on something. I would love to meet people like AOC, and I'm sure we would find lots of common ground and get along. I have a problem with tone, and I have a problem without being ultra rational in our thought, and that's my own limits, right, as a human being. Sometimes have a hard time understanding why people are not ultra rational. But I've been conditioned to that, right? So I've been in the army. I lived in Korea 10 years. If I, if I would be rich I would be wealthy if I had a penny for every time someone said something bigoted to me or with microaggression towards me there, right? So I'm becoming really tone deaf to emotion and really focused on making it all noise and saying, how can I be practical? How can I get what I want? And I think that that's actually what I would call for right now among our leaders. No emotion, right? And think about very practically, how can we get what we need practically, without deception, without being cruel, without saying we're going to get our children younger and we're going to change them. This is not appropriate, right? We have to have good, honest heart with no cruel and no deceptive means to the ends for all of them. And if they can't get there like that, then they simply don't deserve to have what they want, whether they are liberal or conservative. Sorry, you just can't have it. Just accept you don't deserve it, and that your means don't justify the ends, and surrender. And that's how I see things. And so we run a privacy company. I want to be a part of that process. As you can see, I try to be an apolitical CEO. I don't have too many opinions about about that kind of stuff. I care about the greater good. And I think privacy is essential because right now, from my perspective, the establishments around the world are completely failing the people, right? And they're very zealous in taking us in certain directions. And the people, I'm sure, don't agree with that. So we, as a private company, want to protect them. And so I do encourage you to go to ambitvpn.com and give it a try. There will be things that you may not be satisfied with because we are a startup. And so, for example, we are working on improving our infrastructure. So we get throttled on some of our servers. But we have a way of moving this out. We recently brought our own IP addresses that we leased. But our technology itself, left alone, is the best in the world. I believe that. But everything else, we're going to get there. And I can also tell you that we are using encryption that is far superior to TLS, which governs the internet. It's used on OpenVPN. It's used with Tor. TLS is verifiably breakable encryption. So if you're a human rights worker in China, or you're a company not wanting your data to be collected and broken because you don't want them to steal your patent, you should not be using anything with TLS encryption, which includes AnyConnect from Cisco, Pulse Secure, and a whole bunch of consumer VPNs, including ExpressVPN, which is also based out of Hong Kong, right? So if you're using ExpressVPN, you should go do your research on that. And if you want, you can contact you and then contact me, and I will provide you our research on those kind of companies. That's important because they're number 2 in consumer market share. And so I think any company that has an offshore shell company is very suspicious. Why don't you just go ahead and show yourself, right, and let the world see and hide and use their legitimate rule of law. And if they think that they're hiding from the government, that's ridiculous. If you're a Chinese citizen and you set up an offshore company, you're not hiding from the Chinese government. They'll just come squash you, right? So you got to be honest with people about this stuff. Be honest all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we wish you all the best, and thank you for your service in the military, for your time there, and also for your efforts in the privacy space. It's well appreciated. Thank you very much. Well, that's been a great show. So I want to encourage people to support Ambit VPN. That like the gentleman said, Kevin said, it is a startup, so offer your feedback. You guys love feedback. The more feedback you get, the more improvements to all the different processes and user interfaces and everything else you do over there can always be continually improved. So feedback is always great. So we want to thank you very much for this engaging debate, discussion, interview, and also all the best to you there in America, and stay safe, well, and happy, and we'll see you again very soon, Kevin. Thank you very much for doing the show with me.
Thank you so much for your time. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you very much.
Alone. Uncertainty. doubt, fear. In a strange place, something stops you, challenges test your strength. A rush of adrenaline. The light. The air. It is the moment. You elevated.
Life. We have goals that depend on bodies and brains. We work and learn better. We love better when our bodies and our brains function better. At Thrivous, our goal is to help you improve your brain and body, to help you achieve your goals. So that's the power we encapsulate. Ready for help with your goals? Visit Thrivous.com.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem. We've had a main beam undervolt. Roger, main beam undervolt. Okay, stand by, 13. We're looking at it.